Hello photographers, today I want to share with you a flash trick. One of the holy grails of flash photography is getting a clean white background in your photo like this. And the misconception is that you need a bunch of different lights to do this, but you don't. You can do this with just one light, and I'm going to show you how. So the trick here is first understanding how light works and why people normally think they're going to get a white backdrop and don't. So when you're taking a photo, you often have the backdrop back here. And then you have your subject 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, however many feet away from your backdrop. And then you have a light another foot, 2, 3 away from the subject. And then you have your photographer with the camera over here. When light travels, it loses power and intensity. So when you set up a situation like this, you have light that's going to come from the flash, and it's going to hit your subject and reflect back into the camera. And when it does that, your subject, the human, the person, the thing, whatever it is that you're taking a photograph of, will be well exposed. Now, the light is going to continue to travel past the subject all the way over to the backdrop. Then it's going to bounce off of the backdrop all the way back to the camera. And as it travels to the backdrop, it is consistently going to lose power. This is something called the inverse square law. Lots of photographers get scared of this law when they hear it. Inverse square law, it sounds scary. It's not scary. All you need to know about the inverse square law is that it tells us that light loses power at a predictable rate as it travels. So by the time the light gets to the backdrop and bounces off of the backdrop and gets back to the camera, it has lost so much power that your white backdrop actually looks gray or even black in your photo. And if you want a white backdrop, that's very clearly a problem. So how do you fix that? What you need to do is position your subject so that when the light hits your subject in the backdrop, it is at the same power level. If you put your subject right by the backdrop, now all of a sudden, as the light travels to hit your subject, it only has to travel a very short distance additionally to get to the backdrop itself. And that means that the light is generally going to be the same amount of power. Now, it will actually be the exact same brightness when it hits the backdrop if you keep the light further back away from your subject. And here's why. As I said, the inverse square law tells us that light falls off at a predictable rate. And the other thing the inverse square law tells us is that as the light travels further, it takes a greater distance for the light to change power. What that means is if you have a light right here, as the light starts leaving the source, it loses power very quickly and very dramatically. So from here to here, it might lose half its power. And from here to here, it might lose half its power again. But as the light continues to travel, it takes longer for the power to drop off. So now, from this point to this point, it loses half of its power. And then from this point to this point, it loses half of its power. And then from this point to this point, it loses half of its power. Which means all of the light in this section right here is the same power. And as that light hits the subject in the backdrop, it's going to be the same brightness. Which means when that light bounces back into your camera, the light on the backdrop is going to be as bright as the light that hit the subject, which means the backdrop will be white and your subject will be correctly exposed. Boom, white backdrop, one single light. Now, there is something you might be wondering about, which is, isn't there going to be a shadow on the backdrop from the light? Yes, there will be. However, you can avoid this in a couple of different ways. Now, I'm not going to explain how to avoid it in this video. I actually have another video right here that explains exactly how you can avoid shadows on your backdrops and control for that. But just remember this, you can get a clean white backdrop with one light. Just put your subject right up against the backdrop and make sure your light is farther away from your subject. 5 to 6 feet away, that's a good place to put it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you want to support the channel, check the links down in the description. There's a really cool link down in the description you need to check out. And then take some damn photos.